What? Do you need something? I just wanted you to listen. There's nothing to talk about. The divorce is final. If you keep following me around, I'll call the police. What? But we used to be married. Used to be, yes. Now we're strangers. You're just the ex-wife who cheated and left. It's not wise to ask too much from life. Perhaps the best way to find happiness is to live within one's means, in a way that truly suits oneself. But I was greedy, and that greed led me far from happiness. I have a younger brother, 2 years my junior. Since childhood, he's been an academic star, excelling in both sports and studies. In high school, he even served as student body president. He went on to a top-tier university, then pursued a master's at another prestigious school, eventually landing a job at a well-known company. Later, he was headhunted by an even bigger firm, where he met and married a woman. He's been a constant source of insecurity for me. Having a perfect younger brother only makes me feel more miserable. I'm average in academics, sports, even looks. The only thing I could claim as my strength is a broader social network. After graduating college, I returned to my hometown and found a job. While it wasn't as impressive as my brother's position at a major company, I managed to get hired at a decently reputable firm. Even so, family gatherings were always centered around him. Though I've grown used to it as I've gotten older, it's never been a pleasant experience. I thought that at least if I could marry someone more attractive than his wife, I'd finally earn some admiration from my family. I consider myself outgoing, yet I've had no luck with women. At parties, I end up just being the life of the party, not a real romantic prospect. But then I met someone who seemed ideal. It happened at a meetup that a friend dragged me to. The moment I saw Holly, I felt an instant attraction. I doubted she'd ever be interested in someone like me. She was beautiful, cheerful, and her slightly curvy figure was part of her charm. Chase, who are you setting your sights on? My friend Bradley, who was next to me, whispered. Holly, I think. She's gorgeous. Guess I'll go for someone else then. Bradley had organized this meetup to help me, his perpetually single friend, finally meet someone. I decided to take a chance, despite my usual fear of rejection. Holly turned out to be more of a listener than a talker. She'd laugh and compliment me as I spoke, making me feel like a hero. When I successfully got her number, I didn't hesitate to reach out. I felt that if I waited too long, she might forget me. Holly worked as an office assistant with no overtime, which meant she was usually free. Once a week, I'd invite her out after work for dinner, and we'd also meet up on weekends. Sensing how promising she was, Bradley even advised, "If you don't think ahead, you're just wasting your time." I was 32. Holly was 27. It wouldn't be strange for either of us to be considering marriage. So I finally confessed my feelings. "Would you go out with me?" "I'd love that. Thank you for asking." I didn't expect her to agree so quickly. Being in a relationship was great, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't truly love me. She never argued or rejected any of my requests. Yet she also never showed vulnerability or expressed her own desires. Still, things went smoothly, and we eventually decided to get married. The following week, I introduced Holly to my parents. Well, what a wonderful woman. Please take care of Chase." My mother was thrilled. My father had said he was relieved to know that, as the eldest son, I was finally getting married. I had been living with my parents, but after the wedding, I moved into an apartment with Holly. I wanted to buy a house soon, but finding the right location was challenging, so for now, we settled for a temporary place. She had quit her job and started focusing on housework. She'd mentioned wanting to be a stay-at-home wife, Though, honestly, she wasn't really skilled at household chores. Dinner was often half-prepared foods. Well, actually, the main dishes were mostly pre-made, and she'd only fix a few simple side dishes. Even so, I felt content just to be married to Holly, and shopping together on weekends felt like cherished moments of happiness. Holly tended to be impulsive with her spending, and she'd often sigh about money before payday. Why does all the money seem to just disappear? Well, that's because you. What? Because I what? Never mind. Chase, can't you get a raise? That's up to the company. Why don't you switch to a higher paying job? The salary I make now should be enough for us to get by. If it were enough, I wouldn't be saying anything. We had never argued before marriage, but after, she started complaining about money. I'm not interested in working part-time. With that, she made it clear she had no intention of working. My salary was relatively high compared to others my age. I hadn't expected to be criticized like this. I had wanted to buy a house soon, but at this rate, it felt impossible. Yet, after about a year, there was a shift. Her mood seemed to improve. Did something good happen? When I asked, she'd just say, "No, nothing," dismissively. She had to be cheating. I had a hunch. I decided to hire a private investigator to look into it. Walking into an agency with a big sign saying Infidelity Investigations was nerve-wracking, but the staff guided me through the process with practiced ease. They explained the duration and cost, and I went ahead with a week-long investigation. As expected, she was indeed having an affair. They couldn't verify the man's job. Actually, they hinted he might even be unemployed. An affair with an unemployed man. It didn't sit well with me, but at least the affair was confirmed. According to the investigator, he wasn't seeing anyone else but Holly. He was younger than Holly, only 26. When he met Holly, he dressed stylishly, but otherwise, he dressed like he was lounging at home. He lived in an old, low-rent apartment, hardly the type you'd associate with wealth. I had suspected our marriage was about money from her end, but I had accepted that. However, using my money to be with another man was a different story. I needed to find a way to stop Holly from contacting him. Ideally, I'd like to see their messages, but how? Her smartphone was locked, and I didn't know the passcode. Then it hit me. I deliberately stepped on her phone and broke it. If she sends it in for repairs, she'll probably resort to using her computer to contact him. Holly was furious that her phone was broken, but I promised her a new one if it couldn't be fixed, and she seemed to accept that. There is nothing she desires more than material things. The computer usually sits in the bedroom, but ever since we got married, I haven't used it, so she probably thinks it's safe to snoop around on it. 2 days later, while Holly was out, I opened the computer, and sure enough, a messaging app was installed that hadn't been there before. On it was a string of messages that made my stomach turn. I checked the messages from the previous day, and my anger boiled over. When can we meet next week? Tuesday, when the guy who doesn't turn much comes home late. That way, we'll have plenty of time together. Just be careful not to get caught, or we won't be able to see each other anymore. Don't worry, the guy completely smitten with me. The guy, she means me, right? It's true that I'm infatuated, but I don't tolerate infidelity. From that day, I checked the messages every day, and while doing so, I remembered something. Holly loves anniversaries. She would get frustrated when I forgot these special days. It seemed like she was celebrating those days with him as well. 3-month anniversary since we met. Can't wait. Is there anything you want? I'd love some jewelry, but I can't afford anything pricey right now. The business isn't doing so well. Oh, is everything okay? I'm fine. The bank will give me a loan. Good. It must be tough being a business owner. As long as I have you, Holly, everything's fine. Wait, a business owner? A loan? The private investigator said he was unemployed, didn't he? Well, that's beside the point. What worried me more was that Holly seemed to be funneling her own savings from a bank account she's had since before we were married to this guy. Maybe he's a so-called entrepreneur by day and a male escort by night. Maybe he's saving up to start a business. If he's cutting back on his lifestyle for that purpose, then I guess his modest clothing and apartment make sense. But Holly rarely goes out at night. They must be meeting while I'm at work. It's possible he's genuinely involved in some business without the escorting aspect. I started engaging Holly more on her anniversary days with him, intentionally striking up conversations. As expected, she was cheerful and talkative on those days. New jewelry or clothing would appear, though they didn't look particularly expensive. As the messages went on, the man began asking for money more frequently. I manage my own bank account, only giving Holly enough for groceries and some spending money, with no debit card. So if she wants to give him money, it has to come from her own funds. It was clear she was being manipulated by a dangerous man, but the fact remained that Holly was the one cheating. When I felt I had enough evidence, I decided to invite Holly to dinner. How about going out for dinner tonight? That's unusual. What's the occasion? Just thought it'd be nice for a change. I took her to a restaurant I knew she had visited with a man on one of their anniversaries. I've been here before. The food is amazing. Is that so? What would you recommend? You see, without any sign of remorse, she scanned the menu in front of her. Of course, to Holly, I was just a source of money. She didn't dream of any future with me. Hey, I've got a favor to ask. After we finished eating, Holly suddenly looked at me with a serious expression. Is this it? Is she finally going to ask for a divorce? If that's the case, what should I do? Can we increase the budget a bit? Here we go again. Another conversation about money. Are you having trouble managing? Maybe I'm just not good at it. I'm really trying, though. We don't have kids, and I already give you over $2K just for groceries and spending. I know, but when I told my friend about this before, he said, "Are you kidding? Your wife's one lucky lady. Prices are getting so high lately. And we don't have a car, so I can't get to the cheaper stores. Not that she'd go even if we did have one. And, vegetables have gotten ridiculously expensive. She only makes side dishes, and it's just the two of us. All right, really, just keep a budget for a month. I'll decide after that. If it really seems tight, I'll raise it, so don't worry." Got it, thanks. Of course, I didn't expect her to actually keep a budget, but a month later, Holly handed me a detailed budget she'd kept. Here's the budget for the month. Do you see now that it's not enough? It looked like she'd inflated the numbers. Every price was nearly double what you'd expect. A single carrot for $1. Where does she shop? Some gourmet market. And she doesn't even like carrots, so they rarely make it to the table. Yay, looks like you're right, it wouldn't be enough at these prices. See? This budget was up to yesterday's date. Show me the receipt from yesterday. Well, I threw it away. I see. So about that increase in the budget. Okay, I need to check it against the receipt. You didn't say that before. The prices are way off the average, that's all. She fell silent. I guess she gave up. But her meetups with the guy were still happening. Since she couldn't get money from me, it was only a matter of time before he stopped supporting her. It's about time I confronted her with proof of the affair and filed for divorce. Then, out of the blue, I got a call from my family today. My mom collapsed. I need to go home for a while. As soon as I came home, Holly said this. Is she okay? I'll come with you. She's fine, just resting at home. I'm just going to help with the chores. Chores. She couldn't even handle that here. But I guess her mom, Linda, would feel better with her daughter around. All right, take care of her. I'll come by over the weekend to check on things. If you come, Mom won't get any rest. Oh, all right. So Holly went to her parents' place temporarily. 3 days later, she came back looking glum. That was quick. Is Lindy okay now? Yay, she's fine. They sent me home early. Just to be sure, I made a call to Holly's father, Robert, and confirmed that Linda was indeed just a bit worn out, not in a condition that would require Holly to take care of her. Well, that's a relief. It's nothing serious. Yay, it's a relief. But her face didn't exactly look like someone who was relieved. A few days later, while I was at work, my smartphone rang. It was Holly's father, Robert. Chase, could we talk for a bit? I'm in your area. In the area. Did he really drive 3 hours without notice just to come and see me? But I had a meeting and couldn't get out right away. I'm sorry, I have a meeting now. The earliest I'll be free is 5 p.m. That's fine. I'll wait. All right then. I'll call you as soon as I'm done. It must be something important. Could it be that Linda's condition took a turn for the worse? Or maybe something happened to Robert himself. 5 p.m. I called, and Robert was waiting outside the office. I invited her to a nearby pub. It didn't seem like a topic I wanted to bring home, so I invited him to a nearby pub. We ordered some beer and snacks, and I waited for Robert to start talking. After taking a sip of his beer, Robert hesitantly broke the silence. Chase, are things going all right with my daughter? Well, not exactly. But what was I supposed to say? Yes. Well, sort of. I could only manage a vague response. I thought so. He looked at my face and nodded. Wait, did I mess up my response? I took a gulp of my beer to hide my unease. My daughter came to visit us. So it's about Linda. Is Linda feeling better now? Yes, Holly didn't need to come at all. We told her as much, but she insisted on coming anyway. Insisted on coming sounded like something unusual had happened. Actually, Holly asked us to lend her some money. What? I thought you had a good income and weren't struggling financially. Yes, we're fine. I figured as much. It didn't seem like it was for living expenses. So what did you do? Holly kept insisting it was for living costs, but my wife and I could tell she was lying. Well, I can see why. I started to worry that maybe she had taken on some debt without telling you. Debt. She was saying she urgently needed the money. And that's the only reason I could think of. Was my wife really asking her parents for money just to give it to that guy? My anger flared. I'm not aware of any debt, but I'll talk to Holly about it. When I told Robert this, he looked visibly relieved. I'm sorry. I just didn't want to put you in any trouble. The old man's frame seemed to shrink even more as he apologized. I decided to reach out to the investigator again. This time, it wasn't Holly, but the man who needed looking into. I had to know who he really was. Was he just using Holly, pretending it was for a business venture? Soon enough, the report came back, and it contained something I never expected. The man had a criminal record. And not just any record, he had been arrested for marriage fraud. Holly had been targeted by a scam. I needed to tell her, but if I didn't choose my words carefully, I would only end up provoking her. I was so agitated in that moment that I didn't have the presence of mind to choose my words well. So I decided to wait until tomorrow to gather my thoughts and tell her in a careful, orderly way. When I woke up the next morning, Holly, who usually woke up after me, was already awake and preparing breakfast. I just couldn't sleep. So I went ahead and made breakfast. Oatmeal with fruit, bacon, scrambled eggs. She usually only makes toast and coffee. So what's going on? No way she's had a sudden change of heart. This isn't right. Something is definitely off. When Holly behaves out of the ordinary, it usually means she's up to no good. But what could she possibly be doing so early in the morning? Could she have been contacting some guy? Since she got her new smartphone, she hasn't been using the computer, so I have no way of seeing her messages. I thought about this while I got ready for work. Wait a minute. I quickly checked the contents of my wallet in my bag. My debit card from my bank account was gone. Holly had taken it. Holly. I immediately called out to her. Give it back. What? Give it back. My debit card. She hadn't expected me to find out so soon. She probably thought she could withdraw the money today and sneak the debit card back into my wallet tonight. I took the debit card from Holly without a word and left the house. During my lunch break, I went to the courthouse and filed the divorce petition. I had already gathered evidence of her infidelity and prepared the necessary documents, so it didn't take long. After work, I stopped by the gourmet market and bought some high-end prepared foods. Not the kind of thing I'd usually ever eat. I chose them half-heartedly for what was bound to be an uncomfortable dinner tonight. I'm home. Welcome back. Maybe she was starting to feel guilty because she had set out a home-cooked meal on the table. This is snacks. I handed her the gourmet foods. Oh, these are from the gourmet market. I've never had anything like this. Right, thank you. She cheerfully took them to the table. Yes, she's always had a weakness for expensive things. Considering what happened this morning, this isn't the time for her to be all smiles. This is delicious. As Holly filled her mouth with the gourmet food, I interrupted her and began to speak about this morning. Holly's hands froze. What were you planning to use it for? She put down her fork and looked down as she answered. I told you, it was for living expenses. No, it wasn't. It was for a man, wasn't it? What? You thought I didn't know anything. Holly stayed silent. I know you've been meeting another man, and I know you've been spending money on him. Holly's face hardened right before my eyes. You even went as far as using my money. I filed the divorce papers today. You'll get notified soon. When you do, I expect you to sign the consent form. Wait, you're misunderstanding. What misunderstanding are you talking about? The affair is already out in the open. I'm so sorry. I don't know what got into me. Don't put it in the past. It's still going on, isn't it? Were you planning to spend even more of my money on him? Fine, I'll leave you. I'll be supporting him now. And with that, Holly signed the agreement response from the court a few days later. Afterward, we drafted a settlement agreement, and Holly left the house the following morning. Before heading to work, I submitted the settlement to the court. Holly probably went straight to the guy, but a few weeks later, when I got home, I found Holly standing in front of the house. What are you doing here? Do you need something? I wanted to talk. There's nothing to discuss. The divorce is final. If you keep following me, I'll call the police. But we were married. Doesn't that mean anything? She pleaded with tears streaming down her face. We were married. Now we're just strangers. You're nothing more than my ex-wife, who cheated and left. Not a bit of sympathy stirred in me, no matter how she sobbed. In fact, the anger only grew stronger. This isn't your home anymore. If you have nowhere to go, return to your parents' house. With that, I stepped inside and locked the door behind me. Naturally, Holly had left the key when she moved out, so she couldn't just come back in. If she kept causing a scene outside all night, I was ready to actually call the police, but eventually, she left, I hadn't mentioned the divorce to my parents, so I went to visit them that weekend. When I explained everything, they both sighed. Holly did that. Shows you can't always judge a person by appearances, my mom said. My mother had always liked Holly, so it was a blow for her. Forget about her. At least your money is safe, my dad added. About a week later, as I was watching TV before bed, I recognized a familiar face on the screen. I scrambled to find the investigative report, thinking I'd never need it again. I had stuffed it deep into a drawer. From the envelope, I pulled out the 2 photos of Holly and the guy walking arm in arm. It was him, all right, without a doubt. The guy had been arrested again for marriage fraud. There were several victims, not just Holly. It seemed they suspected it was part of a larger scheme. I realized just how close I'd come to losing my life savings to a fraud ring. All those years of hard work weren't just so some criminal could get his hands on my money. Marriage fraud, in my mind, was something that happened to lonely, wealthy women without romantic prospects. I never thought even married women would be targeted, so I was in shock. Holly had believed his talk about running a business, had intended to marry him, and had been giving him money. That night she came to see me. She must have found out the truth and ran to me. Maybe she even heard something from the police. Once they've taken all they can from a woman, she's useless to them. Naturally, she was discarded. The guy might have vanished by now. When I called her parents' house, it turned out Holly hadn't gone back to them. Apparently, the police had also gone to Holly's parents' house, so they knew about the whole incident. Now, there was nowhere left for Holly to go. After that, she never came to me again. Just in case, I moved to a new place and changed my smartphone number. I have no idea where she is or what she's doing now. A woman who spent all her money has limited options for where she'll end up. She may be out on the streets or spiraling down into ruin. But either way, happiness won't be finding her anymore. But I don't feel a shred of sympathy for her. People should reap what they sow. If she hadn't cheated and just lived normally, she could have had a secure future. No, I don't feel any sympathy at all. In fact, I feel a sense of satisfaction, as if to say, serves you right. Technically, I could have sued her for damages, but with her whereabouts unknown, it's too late for that now. Just being rid of her may be compensation enough. In the end, I still haven't managed to prove myself to my older brother, but it doesn't matter to me if I'm compared to him anymore. Through this experience, I've realized that no one can truly see another person's nature. And just like that, my insecurities seem to have disappeared. Life has a way of balancing out the good and the bad. That's what I believe.
Is she running late again? As the start time loomed, I mused while gazing at the empty chair. My coworkers also looked frustrated. Eventually, the owner of that seat showed up about an hour after we'd opened for business. My name is Casey. I'm a 48-year-old office worker. I live with my husband Scott and our 2 kids. My kids are in high school and middle school, so they're pretty independent now, allowing me to focus on my job. Scott recently started a business with some friends, and while it seems tough, he's happier than before. I've been working in accounting for quite some time at this small to mid-size company and get along well with the part-time staff. However, I'm having issues with a newer employee named Frances. She's 24, half my age. The daughter of our managing director, she's clearly a product of nepotism. I didn't mind that initially. It's a small company, and these things happen. So when I heard that the managing director's daughter was joining the company, I just thought, oh, that's it. But Frances is a real piece of work. She was assigned to accounting after one of our part-timers left due to personal reasons. I was mostly handling things on my own, and I'd heard Frances had some qualifications. So, I thought maybe she would lighten my load. Turns out, I was wrong. I'm better off working alone. From our very first meeting, things felt off. When I greeted her, she said, "Sure, nice to meet you, old hag." I was flabbergasted. Not only was her attention divided, but she also had the audacity to call me old hag upon our first meeting. The managing director just watched it unfold with a smile, not seeming to mind. If my kids behaved like that, I'd tell them, "Don't be rude." Are things just different nowadays? I've never really liked our managing director personally. We only converse when necessary. I never knew he was so indulgent with his daughter. He probably thinks she can do no wrong. Confronting Frances would only upset him, so I held my tongue. Though I sighed inwardly, I have a duty to train her, so I went on to explain her the tasks. But Frances wouldn't listen. "I can't remember all these things at once," she said, giving up even on listening. I restrained my irritation and asked her about her so-called qualifications. "I thought you had some kind of certification." "What is it?" I thought maybe I could assign her work based on that, but her answer was, "I'm an accounting clerk." Apparently, she went to a vocational high school and got the certification almost involuntarily. She tried and failed multiple times to become an accounting technician, she told me. Is it really okay to have someone like that in accounting? I had my reservations, but I did my best to train her while focusing on my own work. A month after Frances joined, her attitude hadn't changed, and she still couldn't do her job properly. To be precise, I had taught her the same things repeatedly, but it seemed like she had no intention of remembering, as she didn't even take notes. Other staff members were also complaining that Frances wouldn't do the work they asked of her. What made it even more frustrating was that she was earning the same salary as me, despite my many years of service. Another month passed, and Frances had shown little to no improvement. One day, she didn't show up at the start time. I called her mobile, but it went unanswered. The managing director was out meeting clients and hadn't arrived at the office yet, so everyone was worried. An hour later, Frances finally showed up, acting as if nothing had happened. "What happened? Is everything okay?" I asked. "Oh, looks like I overslept." "What kind of professional does that?" I told her. "If you're going to be late, you should at least inform the office." Frances gave a nonchalant "Okay" in response. Everyone around us sighed in unison. From then on, Frances started being late more frequently. Though she supposedly lived with her family, she spent many nights out, something even the managing director was unaware of. There were times when she would be late even when the managing director was in, but all he would say was, "Oh, you're late today," leaving everyone else dumbfounded. The stress from dealing with Frances kept piling up in various ways. And then the incident happened. "Is she late again?" Even the managing director didn't know. She had spent another night out. Apparently, she stayed at her lover's place. The start time came and went, and she was nowhere to be found. I called her mobile again, but as expected, no answer. "At this point, should we just ignore her?" my colleague Deanna said, clearly frustrated. Finally, Frances arrived, more than an hour late. She sat down at her desk without a greeting and started putting on makeup as if nothing had happened. Everyone was stunned, but she didn't seem to care. I finally had to say something. "Frances, this really isn't okay." She looked at me, puzzled. "They don't seem to know what's wrong. You come in late, no greeting, and you start doing your makeup?" Just then, I saw the managing director returning to his desk, but I continued. "I've told you before to call if you're going to be late, remember?" It felt ridiculous having to say this to a 24-year-old adult. It was like scolding a child. Francis just sulked, acting, indeed, like a child. The last thing I said was, "Isn't it common courtesy to apologize when you're late?" The managing director stormed over to me, his face twisted in anger. He yelled at me, "You insolent brat! Who do you think you are? You're fired!" I almost blurted out, "What?" but held my tongue. Nervous glances spread through the room. Of course, the president is conveniently absent. Well, the president's not really reliable, to begin with. Frustrated with the managing director's tirade, my colleague Deanna spoke up. "Wait a minute, Casey hasn't said anything wrong here." Deanna works in sales and hates injustices. She has a strong sense of right and wrong. We've been good friends for a long time, and we help each other out at work. Everyone else in the room nodded at Deanna's words, but not the managing director. He yelled at Deanna, "You're talking back to me? You're fired too." I couldn't take it anymore and glared at the managing director. "Are you serious about this?" Deanna was glaring at him too. He declared both of us fired and told us to leave immediately. At that moment, the president returned, but did nothing but look puzzled. Apparently, the president and the managing director are relatives, and for some reason, the president can't oppose him. Fed up, Deanna and I packed up and left. We stopped by a cafe on the way to catch our breath. "What's his problem?" "I was getting tired of the job, but I didn't think I'd have to quit like this," Deanna said, still fuming. Indeed, we had started to think about quitting the company ever since Francis arrived. "I feel bad that you got fired because of me." That was my biggest concern. Had I not spoken out, Deanna wouldn't have been fired. Deanna reassured me. "It's okay. I was tired of working full-time anyway. Maybe this is a chance to find a part-time job." "What about you, Casey?" "I've actually been offered a part-time accounting position at Scott's company." Deanna thought that sounded like a better option. "Both the managing director and Francis really tick me off." Deanna was still angry, and I agreed with her. "I wonder if the company will be all right without us." "Not that it's any of our business." I said that, and Deanna finally smiled. "Exactly. Even if they beg us to come back, I won't. I feel like suing them for wrongful termination." We decided to take some time to cool off and discuss what to do next. When I got home and told Scott about what happened, he was even angrier than I was. "What? What's up with that managing director?" I was furious too, and unsure about whether I'd made the right decision, but Scott's reaction confirmed that I wasn't in the wrong. Scott's words were comforting, and I finally felt at ease. I then started working in accounting at Scott's company. The part-time accountants who were already there told me they felt more at ease now, as their workload had lightened. Deanna, too, started working for Scott's company. Though not full-time like before, but part-time. Since we were fired on the spot and had to pack up immediately, we hadn't been able to do the paperwork for leaving the company. Someone, probably my successor Francis, would take care of it. We started working energetically in our new environment. After some time had passed, I received a call from the managing director of my previous company. "We don't understand the accounting you were handling. Come to the office immediately." What's he talking about? Could it be they're failing at the monthly payments to clients and sales calculations that I used to handle? Besides, we haven't even received our exit paperwork yet. But we were fired just for being late. Who do they think they're talking to? Needless to say, I declined. No can do. But the managing director was relentless. "Come right now, and we'll rehire you. You haven't found another job yet, have you?" I sighed. No thanks. I've already switched jobs. I've taught Frances everything about accounting. Not sure if she gets it, though. I hung up after saying that. Apparently, Deanna also got contacted. There were several clients who said they'd stop doing business if Deanna wasn't handling their accounts. The managing director arrogantly offered her re-employment as well. He had underestimated Deanna, thinking she was just a female salesperson and wasn't capable of handling work. It turned out she was a valuable employee. This fueled our anger towards the managing director once again. Meanwhile, my phone kept ringing, with calls from the previous company reaching over 100 in just a few days. Even when I answered the phone thinking that I had completed the necessary documents for my resignation, I was simply told to come quickly because they would rehire me from above. We'd had enough. Frustrated, Deanna and I decided to go to the previous company and give them a piece of our minds. Upon seeing us, the managing director said, "Ah, you finally came back. You should have returned obediently from the start." We hadn't returned to the company, we were there to confront him. I said with a smile, "You should have no problems if Frances is handling the accounting, right? I taught her everything. If she can't do it, that's on her. You, as both a parent and a boss, are failing if you haven't even noticed her poor behavior." The managing director's face turned red with anger. "How dare you? I even offered to rehire you." I calmly responded, "That's precisely why we don't want to be rehired. In fact, we were considering quitting anyway." He looked utterly shocked. "What?" I went on. "Has Frances started acting like a responsible adult yet? While I don't deny nepotism, at least have her work properly. The way she talks, the attitude when she listens, everything about her is unprofessional. Shouldn't you, as her parent, be the one to address these issues? And you fire us just because we pointed that out? It doesn't make sense. To be honest, I couldn't care less about being fired. It was clear things would go south if Frances was the only one left in accounting." The managing director glared at me. "Plus, firing Deanna, who's a stellar salesperson, shows you really don't know what you're doing. No wonder you're losing clients. How many have you lost in the last month?" I say with a grin, and the managing director's face turns beet red. "I came here today to talk about our wrongful termination. We need you to provide the necessary documents. Also, I wanted to see firsthand how much trouble you're in without us." Deanna chimes in after me. "I've already consulted a lawyer about the wrongful termination. We're willing to consider a settlement if it spares us all the hassle." "What will it be?" The managing director bursts out. "What wrongful termination? I was fired on the spot for bringing up issues with an employee's behavior. This is clearly wrongful termination," I say assertively, locking eyes with the visibly pale president. "President, this is your company, isn't it? Your relationship with the managing director has nothing to do with us. Getting more than 100 phone calls is crazy, don't you think? You fire us and now you want us back because you're in a jam? Who do you think would even listen to that?" The president only manages to look paler, unable to say a word. "Mr. President, you've done accounting work before, right? I trust you'll handle the rest." Deanna and I decide there's no point in further discussion and turn to leave. We'll leave the rest to our lawyer. With that, we leave the company. After some time, we received a request for a settlement through a lawyer, and we agreed. We were recognized as victims of wrongful termination, and we got our unpaid wages, severance pay, and a settlement amount higher than the market rate. We were pleased. It felt like we had finally had our revenge on the company. Both Deanna and I would sometimes get urgent calls from clients while we were out, as we had given them our personal numbers. After we abruptly left, some even called to check up on us. I told them the situation and that we had been wrongfully terminated. Word spread quickly in our tight-knit industry. Most of Deanna's clients left once she quit, probably cutting the company's business in half. According to a former colleague, staff kept leaving the company, they were getting complaints from clients, and the president and managing director were overwhelmed trying to keep things running. Frances couldn't manage, so the wife of the former accounting president had to step in. She's a very stern person, and Frances was having a hard time, crying every day. 6 months later, the company apparently went bankrupt. It might be a good thing they lasted half a year. One day, I saw someone who looked like the managing director at a supermarket near the station. I couldn't help but stare. There he was, dressed in the supermarket's uniform, getting yelled at by a young man who seemed to be the store manager. Looks like he's working part-time at the supermarket because he couldn't find another job. I couldn't help but laugh at the irony of the once haughty managing director getting scolded by someone younger. Our eyes met from a distance, and I gave him a nod, which he of course ignored. But I frequent that supermarket, so every time I go, I look for the managing director, who's usually getting yelled at for something. I thought he was competent, but later learned from Deanna that he just took credit for his subordinates' work. By the way, when I told Deanna about the supermarket, she started going there out of curiosity and became a regular customer. In a way, the managing director is contributing to the supermarket's revenue, so maybe he's competent after all. But he's always getting yelled at. Deanna and I continue to work happily at Scott's company. Scott even said he's relieved because our work has increased the company's sales. We're both looking forward to Scott treating us to dinner for our upcoming birthdays.